A year ago today, the first part of Dragon's Rising Season 2 released, and as soon as it did, I had an instant connection to it. It's the first piece of Ninjago media in a long while that I've really latched onto, and so much of it heavily resonated with me, and I immediately fell in love with this chapter of Dragon's Rising. I think it's absolutely the best thing to come out of an Ninjago franchise, so with it having been a whole year since it was released, I wanted to talk about it and give my full thoughts on it, because it is absolutely fantastic. Right off the bat, this season wowed me with its aesthetics and visuals. Locations like the Forest of Spirits, Phantasm Cave, and Eagles and Rontu's training plateau are so visually appealing to me. Most of the places we visit in this 10-episode stretch have such an eerie feeling to them, making this entire season really visually appealing while having this really crushing atmosphere where we really get a feel for how bad things are for the ninja. This part having a more somber feel to it really helps the serious tone that we're going for, and it really helps this part feel like a distinct chapter, not only in Dragon's Rising, but in Ninjago as a whole. The rest of the visuals on display are absolutely stunning. Everything from the set pieces, the fight animation, the choreography, and the lighting is absolutely the best we've seen from Ninjago up until this point. The pure soul that emanates from so many of the shots this season are absolutely insane, with some of them being the best from the entire franchise. On top of this, the set pieces are absolutely fantastic. So many of them massively contribute to the eerie feeling of these episodes, and the visuals are absolutely a highlight for me. It really helped drive the aesthetics home for me. Fantastic stuff all across the board in terms of visuals. I genuinely couldn't ask for better from Ninjago. On top of this, every single action scene, be it the Ninja vs Cinder or even just the Ninja training, feels so well crafted and planned out. I genuinely cannot think of a single action scene that falls flat for me. All of them are just so well made, with a highlight obviously being the final fight between Kai and Cinder, which transitions into the insanely well choreographed Lloyd vs Raz fight. These 10 or so seconds of Lloyd and Raz throwing down is absolutely the best piece of action to come out of Ninjago as a franchise. It's amazingly well done, and surprisingly enough, it isn't a Wu vs Crystal King situation, where the choreography is absolutely amazing, but the actual story sucks. With this fight and almost every other fight this season, the story backing it is really good, so I'm going to start getting into it. As the start of Dragon's Rising's second season, this part had a lot to follow up on, and a lot to expand upon, most notably Arin's character, which so far had been left a bit to the wayside. In Season 1, Arin was an idealistic kid who looked up to the ninja, and after teaching himself spinjitzu, he was given the opportunity to train under Lloyd. After seeing his parents in the Mergequake battle in the Season 1 finale, Arin was pretty shaken up and immediately went for any piece of new info he could find on the Merge, even resorting to watching bad YouTube content made by an insane conspiracist. Arin's main goal once he finds his parents is to make them proud of the ninja he's become, which to him means being the best he possibly can, which unfortunately for him doesn't seem to be happening. He worries about his skill level and fears that he isn't improving fast enough, and these fears are only made worse by the fact that his primitive and bare-bones spinjitzu, the whole reason he's so special to begin with, isn't enough for him to train with the rest of the ninja in Rising Dragon technique, causing him to be demoted down to first Fang after badly injuring Eagles in training. Arin's self-doubt is absolutely one of the most compelling parts of this entire chapter for me, and leads to what I think is the best scene of the entire season, his encounter with Raz in episode 9. Everything about this scene is perfect in my opinion. The build up, the score, Arin's slow beatdown, and the final conversation they have is so well done. This really is the moment that all of Arin's self-doubt and lack of faith in his own abilities really hits him, because now he's had someone outside of his team remark on his lack of improvement, instead of it being coated with reassurance and praise about how he could be the best ninja. To cap it all off, the hint that Raz, someone who focuses on strength, could train and mentor Arin is, in my opinion, at least the most hype moment and foreshadowing of this entire chapter, because seeing a member of the ninja team defect to the other side because of something that isn't memory loss or corruption is unheard of for Ninjago, so this being hinted at was incredibly exciting. The continuation of Arin's arc and the setup that's here for future arcs is amazingly done in my opinion, and easily one of, if not the best part of this set of episodes. Since we briefly touched on Raz, we're going to talk about him next, because in these 10 episodes he cements himself as one of, if not the best villain the Ninjago franchise has to offer. This chapter heavily leads into Raz as a master and teacher that opposes and mirrors Lloyd and Eagles, and gives us more of his manipulation, something we saw in Season 1. This chapter in DR's story makes Raz a master to 2 younger students, something that I personally wasn't expecting at all. To briefly recap why Raz is a master, Raz took 2 students under his wing in this part, those students being Cinder and Jordana. Throughout these episodes, we see him train Cinder in fighting and shatter spin, while Jordana is taught in the art of Feroxian magic. For someone like Raz, who we've seen display immense strength and anger, He seemed pretty level-headed throughout this part. Seeing Raz be overall pretty sympathetic and a genuinely good teacher towards his students wasn't something I expected from him, but it's really interesting when you compare him to Lloyd or Egalt. I'll talk about why Egalt is a cool character later in the video, but I think it's really cool how teachers that oppose each other in different fighting styles and ideologies aren't inherently different because of what they believe in. Because we see that both Egalt and Raz can lose their tempers and be mean towards their students, but overall they are somewhat approachable as masters, and that's such a cool parallel to have because it really gives nuance to the principles that these opposing sides have, those being strength and motion. Raz as a master was such a good piece of progression for his character, and I think what they did with him in part 2 was absolutely fantastic, and I have some very high hopes for what they do with him in season 3. Raz is absolutely amazing in this set of episodes, and the way he continues to manipulate characters and pull the strings is really well executed too. They did a fantastic job of building him up as a threat beyond just his brute strength, which, by the way, is put on display so amazingly here because he absolutely destroys everyone in almost every fight he's in, and it really helps making him an imposing threat to the ninja. Having a villain who's not only insanely strong, but a manipulator who plays mind games with our main characters makes him such a well-rounded threat to the ninja, and it really helps give him some depth beyond just believing in strength above all, which the 5 admittedly do suffer from. I adore how Raz is handled in these episodes, and they easily cemented him as an all-time Ninjago villain for me. He's probably my favourite villain of the entire franchise. He's just such a wonderful character, and I really cannot wait to see where the show takes him in the future. The rest of the villains this season are overall really good too, particularly Jordana because she is super compelling in this set of episodes. Having a villain who nobody remembers is a really funny bit for sure, but it's also insane to see how much she's risen up in the world since the fall of Imperium. She went from being a nobody scientist to one of the leaders of a wolf clan, and it's such a perfect ascension for her character. Jordana, being someone who wants to be acknowledged, relies on others to feel recognized and validated, so seeing her join Raz because he's one of the few people to have noticed her makes perfect sense to me, and it adds a lot to Raz as a master because you really have to wonder how sympathetic he really is and if he really does care about his students. The other student that Raz has is Cinder, who overall is a bit underwhelming as a character, but there's still some good stuff there. Cinder being a foil of sorts to Jordana leads to a really interesting dynamic between the two because you have to wonder why Cinder is the way he is and what his fatal flaw is that Raz used against him. Cinder in the spot is still a pretty interesting character despite how little they did with him in the second part, which is unfortunate because he is pretty cool. Cinder is another person who pursues strength above all, and it seems to be an act to cover up the fact that he's a deeply insecure individual. In almost any situation he's in, he flaunts his powers, be it elemental or shatter spin, to try and prove that he's superior to others. This leads to the dynamic with Jordana where they both try and fight for Raz's attention and approval, and seeing them bicker and argue over who's more valuable to the team is a really cool little subplot. He's essentially Jordana's opposite because he seems to excel in pretty much everything, whereas Jordana has to fight to be even remembered. Seeing villain teams have actually good and interesting dynamics is always something I'm a big fan of, so this to me was no exception. Despite being a pretty basic character with some cool stuff to him, Cinder slowly losing his humanity through shattering his goodness is at the very least a fantastic main threat to the ninja, and raises the stakes a lot, so at least there's that going for him. I really do hope we see this guy back though because he's in desperate need of some more development after part 2. As for the complete opposites of Cinder, it's time for us to talk about the ninja, and I think they were handled really well here. Looking at the team as a whole, the dynamics they have in place are really solid, and having the team break off into smaller chunks again does wonders to make the cast feel fleshed out and properly developed, and avoids it being too bloated. As we go through the ninja, I'll highlight some of the dynamics of their team because quite a few of them are really interesting to me, and some of the ninja have their best characterization in years, the most notable of which being Kai. The best way I can describe Kai in this part is similarly to how I would describe Cole in Master of the Mountain. It's a collection of all of his best traits and characteristics leading to what is, in my opinion at least, his best portrayal in the entire franchise. Kai being this kinda cocky but fun character is nothing new for him, but seeing how he interacts with the rest of the team is fantastic, and does wonders to make him feel important at off of the sidelines, which was often a problem with the 11-minute era. The way we see him help and support the younger ninja is absolutely fantastic, giving out some great advice and helping them with things that he struggled with in the past. Kai's character here really feels like the culmination of everything his character arcs have built up to over the years, and seeing him finally get his big moment against Cinder in the mid-season finale was so nice to see. I loved Kai in this part, and it's the first time that I've actually been invested in Kai as a character, which is saying something because I really was not a big Kai fan before this. As for Kai's student Wildfire, she's handled really well here. She continues to be the funniest character on the team, and the best part is that it doesn't interfere with her journey of becoming a more well-adjusted and well-adapted person. Seeing her become more and more accustomed to things like injuries and being more empathetic to other characters is something we saw her struggle with in Season 1, and it's some really nice development to see her actually come to grips with it more here. The highlight for me has to be her interactions with Eagle, because they both struggle to be around people, so seeing Wildfire helping in any way she can, not only with his sickness but with being around other people, is so great for her to see, and I am all here for it. She continues to be an absolutely fantastic character, and I genuinely love whenever she's on screen. On the topic of Eagle, I think he's an absolutely fantastic character. He really works for me as a mentor character and as a really interesting addition to the line of teachers we currently have. Eagle is this really strict and hard mentor who really beats down Arin's self-confidence over the course of the training arc, and this often leads into conflicts with Lloyd's style of teaching, which is very forgiving towards mistakes. It's so refreshing to see, because while Wu could be strict at times, we never really saw him be as strict or as mean as Eagle, so it's a really nice change of pace. What really sells Eagle for me is his motivations and reasons for being the way he is. Being terminally ill with a wasting sickness, Eagle is no longer in any shape to be the hero he once was, meaning he's nothing more than a fading legend, someone who was a legendary warrior, but now his life's purpose is about to be undone by Raz. Upon realizing that his legacy could be continued and carried on by the ninja, he and Rontu decide to train the ninja in Rising Dragon technique. Once they succeed, Eagle realizes that his life did have a purpose and that the ninja are capable of passing down his techniques to a new era of fighters if need be. Seeing him realize that his legacy will live on and that his life wasn't meaningless genuinely made me feel so happy. Every time this guy was on screen, he was an absolute joy to watch. Rontu, on the other hand, is a cool character, but not as interesting to me. She very much falls in between Lloyd's and Eagle's ways of teaching, meaning she's far more encouraging and optimistic than Eagle, but she's still tougher than Lloyd, who's very forgiving. She isn't developed too much as of right now, and that's something I do hope they change, because Eagles is an absolutely fantastic character, and it would be really nice if I could say the same about Rontu, and that both the Dragon Masters were really well developed. She's still really cool, don't get me wrong, I still really enjoy her presence, but I do wish she was a bit more developed. As for the final master we have in this part, I want to talk about Lloyd, and he was absolutely fantastic in this part, genuinely one of the highlights. Lloyd's main story of this part has to do with his anxiety and mental health issues, and how to cope and try and overcome them. Lloyd in DR is absolutely someone with a lot of self-doubt, and he often compares himself to Master Wu, so seeing that self-doubt be made even worse, on top of being insanely intrusive and frightening, made for such a good anxiety allegory in my opinion. The continuation of this overarching master story being woven into an anxiety storyline makes complete sense to me, because we see how nervous he is leading the team in Season 1, and this makes for a great continuation of that. Seeing him confide in the other ninja about how much these issues are affecting him really hits for me, and seeing the way these conversations are written really makes you feel for him. The way they resolve this arc, at least for part 1, is probably the best way they could have done it too, with Lloyd accepting that he has to live with these visions after trying to push them away for so long. Sending the message that you can live and cope with these sorts of disorders is a really powerful message in my opinion, and I think they did a fantastic job of portraying it here. Lloyd was absolutely fantastic in Dragons Rising Season 2 Part 1, and I think he continues to cement himself as one of Ninjago's strongest characters, if not their strongest. I absolutely loved Lloyd this part, and his story really resonated with me. The person who Lloyd confides in the most is Nia, and she continues to be one of the best supporting characters in Dragons Rising. In terms of just her basic characterization, it's really well done here, but most notably she, much like Hai, does a fantastic job of supporting other members of the team. She's an excellent second in command to Lloyd, and it's just great to see how supportive she is of other characters, while still being the badass Nia we all know and love. As for her not so better half Jay, the setup for a story with Nia was pretty alright. The Phantasm Cave stuff was really good in my opinion, and it really helps with setting up the Jay memory loss arc, but I do think that Jay's integration could have been a bit better after that, because I don't think we needed to see him in Mysterium for the setup to work, because the info given to us in large part is the same as what we got from the Phantasm Cave scene and his short cameos in the administration, and I think it does drag on a bit at times. It's some good setup overall, and the payoff is really good in the tournament in my opinion, so overall this plotline, while flawed, had some really good stuff in it, but I do think it could have been trimmed down a bit, because I think it does drag on just a bit at times. The final member of the main cast that we need to cover is Sora, and surprisingly enough she was really well handled here. Going into this season, I was really dreading Sora being sidelined since her big arc is over, but no, they actually pulled through and gave us a really solid continuation of her season 1 story. Seeing how she's gone from being this gloomy pessimist to being optimistic feels so earned after season 1, and she effectively ends up mirroring Arin, who's become more of a gloomy pessimist himself. She isn't completely optimistic, don't get me wrong, and she doesn't excel at everything she does, but she does have a much more positive outlook on life, and that's some great payoff for season 1. Her story this chapter ends with her faking Arin's objects ninjutsu, and it kind of shows that she still hasn't quite broken out of her pessimist mentality since she doesn't exactly trust Arin to follow through with performing the objects ninjutsu. While it does end up working in the team's favour, it is still rather pessimistic on her part to assume that Arin's going to fail and to fake it for him. And it's a really interesting setup for the second half of the season, where admittedly a lot of the really interesting stuff with her character this season is, so I might talk about that another time, but what's in part 1 is really good, and I love how it was a really good and solid continuation of what was in season 1. Moving away from our main cast though, it's time for us to end this video on the side quest characters, those being Cole, Zane and Bonzel. Overall, this subplot is probably the weakest part of this season for me, and it's still a really good and fun subplot, don't get me wrong, but it absolutely could have been a lot better in places. The basic plot structure of most DR parts is to have a main cast and a side cast. This time the side cast was comprised of Zane, Cole and Bonzel, so while the rest of the ninja were off learning Rising Dragon technique under Eagle Toronto, these guys were off trying to find a way to protect Bonzel, and some of the stuff that goes on in this quest was really fun, and I really enjoyed our time in Mysteria, and some of the storehouse activities were pretty fun, but on the whole, this whole subplot can be a bit of a drag at times. While I don't hate the drama stuff in episode 6, it also wasn't really necessary, and I think it went on for a bit too long, and the same absolutely goes for the latter half of the storehouse subplot. Admittedly, this plot ends in a really good place with them liberating the Cloud Kingdom, and it starts off really strong with Bonzel's backstory, but the middle part of it really does drag at times, and it absolutely feels that way because the main plot is so damn compelling and great, so cutting away from it from a sometimes not so interesting subplot wasn't always the best move. While in theory the subplot is really fun, it can distract from the main plot at times, which is such a shame because there's some really interesting character stuff in here, most notably from Bonzel. Bonzel is such a subversive yet amazing side character in my opinion. While she was pretty unremarkable in season 1, she was still really enjoyable to watch, but season 2 takes her to whole new heights and at a depth that I never thought we'd see from this random skeleton. Bonzel's story of choosing the body she wants and wanting to be accepted by the sorceress, to me at least, reads as a trans allegory, and I think it's one that was really well executed. I think her backstory was really compelling and I really felt for her in these episodes. Seeing that she's gotten everything she's ever wanted with the finds is so heartwarming to see, and it adds so much to that whole dynamic. She has a really neat story and the whole Finders group continues to be really compelling to me. I absolutely love that group. This allows me to talk about one of our 2 subplot ninja, that being Cole, who admittedly I don't have a lot to say on. He continues to be a really supportive rock to the team and is consistently kind and caring while being great at helping others. He's exactly as he was in Master of Mountain, and that's absolutely great in my opinion. Cole continues to be an amazing character in DR, and I think he has such a great presence. I absolutely love how they've essentially just continued all the momentum that they had from Master of Mountain with him. It's great. As for the final character in the subplot, we have to talk about Zane, and to be honest, he is pretty unremarkable. He doesn't add anything to the story, but he isn't offensive in any way, which, all things considered, is pretty alright by Zane's standards. I just have nothing to say about this guy. He isn't too interesting here, or is he in any DR media so far? In conclusion, Dragon's Rising Season 2 Part 1 is absolutely the best thing to come out of Ninjago, hands down. It handles almost all of its arcs really well, has a super compelling story, and all of this with some of the best and most hyper moments in the entire franchise. I absolutely love this part, and it only felt right to commemorate its 1-year anniversary with this video. If you did enjoy this video and somehow made it all the way to the end, please do consider subscribing. It would mean a lot to me and it would be so greatly appreciated. All the support I've got so far means so much, and I genuinely cannot thank you guys enough for it, so just genuinely thank you so much. It means so much to me. I also just want to quickly mention if there's enough interest for it, I can make a review on part 2 of this season, because that's another absolutely amazing Ninjago outing and I would love to talk about that in depth, so let me know if that interests any of you. Anyways, with that being said, that's where I shall leave you all for now, and I will see you next time. Goodbye. Well, at least that Nocta for Forbidden 5 guy didn't end up being a bum, am I right lads, or am I right lads?